I'll call to order the June 24th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission. Ms. McGill, will you call roll, please? Oh, wait a minute. Excuse me. We have the pledge first. Mr. Burns, will you lead us?
Please follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we'll do roll call.
Chair Longstreet.
Here.
Connor.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Hockman.
Here.
Vice Chair Larimore Hall is not present, and Intern Torres Santos is not present.
Thank you. Ms. Rapp, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Chair Longstreet.
Written communications? Okay, that brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 1 minute on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the Commission. And I have one public comment speaker, and that is Ms. Jones. Would you like to come forward?
Chairman Longstreet and members of the Commission, I am Monica Jones. I am a member of the Friends of Los Banos, and at this juncture I'm the outreach coordinator and the person who is trying very hard to raise money so that our children will have the opportunity to swim. As you can see on the overhead there, due to budget cuts, it was decided to cut out all free recreational swimming for children this summer, which many people regret, this 100% cut on the kids who can least afford it. That is $8,600. Fortunately, a kind, generous, and beautiful mermaid will match any donation. So, essentially, we only have to find $4,300 if everybody will donate. I will add that Mayor Bloom and the members of the City Council were all generous, and I hope you people and those listening can also contribute a little bit. We have been really doing this in 5s, 10s, some 25s, a few 50s, very few $100, so no donation is too small and all are appreciated. We are also trying to raise $4,200 to keep Los Banos Pool open on Sundays, which is really vital for adults who work who can't swim at other times. The total, if you add it up, is approximately $13,000. Thus far, we have raised $4,000. We have matching for $4,000, so we only need to find $5,000 in the next week or so. So we appreciate any help that anybody can give. We are a nonprofit organization, and therefore all donations are tax deductible. They can be sent to the Friends of Los Banos at P.O. Box 19622, Santa Barbara, California 93190, or one can go online to the friendsoflosbanos.org, www.friendsoflosbanos.org. If anybody has additional questions, they are welcome to call me. My name's Monica Jones. My number is 569-2407, and my email is desmonicajones@cox.net, and I would welcome any questions any of you might have as to what we are trying to do. For those of you who don't remember, the Friends of Los Banos were the people who raised more than $1 million in the 1990s to refurbish the Los Banos pool. So we have, through the years, worked very hard on behalf of the swimmers and the less fortunate of our community who really need our help to be able to swim.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We really salute the work you've done so far. We hope that the community will send in their checks to you. I'm sure they could drop them at Los Banos or...
Well, you can't. It is preferable that you mail them to the Friends of Los Banos, but if you lose the address, you can call Parks or Rec or the mayor's office, or you can do it online with PayPal. PayPal will accept credit cards now.
Thank you. That's very good for everybody to know, and thank you so much for all the work you're doing. We really appreciate it, and I encourage everyone to open their wallets and help the kids. I mean, these are the kids on the Lower West Side, and East Side that will benefit the most by this, and they don't have other alternatives for swimming.
Well, as I say, most of us got help from somebody to learn how to swim, and it's a matter now of giving forward to help other people. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much. Okay. That brings us to community service recognitions. Ms. Rapp?
Item number 1 will be postponed, and we'll do that at your next meeting, hopefully. Item number 2 is the recognition of Healthy Start Director Teresa Weisglass. And I wanted to make a few comments, so I may step on the toes of my staff, who will also be talking to you about Teresa, but I wanted to start off just by letting you know Teresa has been the director of the Santa Barbara School District's Healthy Start and After School Opportunities for Kids programs, AOK, since AOK became a joint program with the city and the school district in our 5 of our schools. She's been the director for 10 years and has just been such a fabulous partner for the city in working together over all these years to allow us to participate and offer one of the best quality after-school programs that money can buy, largely because it's funded by the state. So, but I do want to talk a bit just about Teresa from my own perspective. I did have the opportunity to attend the official, very entertaining ceremony luncheon yesterday where Teresa was celebrated in all of her contributions. And I really wanted to talk to you, and many of you have been on the commission a long time. You know the value of the AOK program to our after-school programs. The city and the school district have partnered for many years to offer after-school programs, but with the introduction of the AOK program, we moved into a model that had more of a focus on the academic improvements for the children in our community, and to really put in a structure that offered quality programming. And Teresa was really the brains and the stamina and the leadership and the passion behind pulling all of that partnership together over all those years and building strong collaboration and keeping everything moving forward. And, you know, in some instances you can really point to somebody and say, you know, it is hard to imagine how that program could have grown to the caliber that it did without that particular person. And I believe I'm not the only person in the room who would agree that we would not have the caliber program that we have today without Teresa's passion and leadership. And so I really would like to have one of my staff, Terry, if you could come up and talk a bit about our experience with Teresa and your experience. You've worked with her all these years. And turn to you.
Thank you for saying all that you said. Saves me having to say it all. My name's Teresa Brown, Youth Activities Supervisor, and I have had the pleasure of working with Teresa, and you can tell by who's present here, Dr. Sarvis and Associate Superintendent Robin Sawaski and Assistant Director Sharon Roth and many of Teresa's associates that she's very important to us. She's going to be missed. She is retiring, she says. We shall see. Everyone's begged her back so far. What I wanted to say was my piece about knowing Teresa, which was 11 years ago, I was notified that we were going to sort of talk to the district about adding an educational component to the 5 Title I schools. And so I kind of made a joke yesterday at Teresa's luncheon about the marriage that occurred trying to marry recreation and education. And we only had 3 days in a hotel in Pomona to do it. So that was a huge challenge. And I made this joke about this big, huge notebook that we basically just kind of threw out because it was just all about being partners. And with Teresa's experience, she knew exactly what she wanted, and she's always taken a leadership role, and she has always guided all of us to make sure that the best interest of the kids was always number one. And I just wanted to publicly thank her. She's mentored me, and she's made me a better supervisor and a better programmer in the after-school programs. And at this time, I don't know if Dr. Sarvis or anybody wanted to say a few words, but if not, I would love to have Teresa come up and just be acknowledged. Thank you.
Come on up, Teresa. And I didn't give it away last week, did I?
Well, I can't resist. Teresa has been a champion for kids. She's built programs, she's strengthened programs. I've never had anyone come to my office so many times asking for just a signature on this and a signature on that, because this organization in town is contributing, and we're building our well, I call it kindergarten boot camp, but I know we call it kindergarten academy for pre-kindergarten, or just any number of activities that are all about growing healthy kids.
Thank you.
We're going to miss Teresa tremendously.
Thank you very much.
Well, I would say that I first met Teresa 26 years ago when my son was in the Saturdays with Daddy class, and that was my first exposure to Teresa Weisglass. And it was a wonderful class. And then as I worked for the district for many years, I had the privilege of serving on committees with Teresa at the beginning of AOK. As a parent and as a staff member, I was privileged to attend those trainings and to participate. And Teresa had a vision, and she followed it through to the end. And all of our children are better for it. I think that Teresa was able to stay the course when there were times it was rough. Getting everybody on the same page is not an easy thing. Getting the advocates trained, and Teresa just had a gift for getting everybody on board and then keeping them moving. So it's our pleasure to give you this certificate of appreciation, but I don't think it begins to say how much we will all miss you and how grateful we are for everything you have done. So no handshakes, we need a hug.
Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you. I want to very much thank all of you for this recognition. It's been a great privilege working with two wonderful institutions that serve the children and families of our community, the City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department and the Santa Barbara School Districts. And I thought I was going to be coming here to second what Terry was saying and say a few words about how great our partnership has been in delivering this program. But as a matter of fact, I thought, oh, how great. It gives me a little opportunity to recognize some people. So I'm turning the tables right now. And because I've already recognized some of the other staff in different situations. But you're going to be dealing with a little mutual admiration society here, because Terry Brown, could you please come? And you know, partnership is two, and so it's two institutions that have been working with each other, but also sets of two people. And Terry, if you would just come up here. Maybe it's because we both have the name Teresa, and in my private life, I'm called Terry. Anyway, Terry was the perfect partner for me, because she has just been so dedicated and so open-minded and so wanting to continually upgrade the standards of our mutually delivered program. So, on behalf of the Santa Barbara School Districts, this is signed by myself and Dr. Sarvis, and this is a certificate of recognition honoring Terry Brown for providing 10 years of outstanding service, enthusiasm, and creative ideas as a member of our mutual agency's AOK program leadership team, and that includes having helped design the program itself, over coffee and around tables, etc., and for your exemplary commitment to bringing engaging and high-quality youth activities to students in the Santa Barbara school districts and throughout the Santa Barbara community. Thank you very much for all you've done. And then on a personal note, because I really have so appreciated the collaboration with the Parks and Recreation Department, and of course with the blessing of the Commission, it's been really a wonderful experience. And as I've come to know by going to regional and even statewide meetings, this is really quite a model that does not exist in too many parts of our state. So, Nancy, maybe you'd like to come over for this. This is a certificate of appreciation recognizing the City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department for 10 years of consistent support and advocacy on behalf of the AOK program for providing excellent sports activities, leadership, and staff, and for generosity in offering facilities use as our key partner, including yesterday for my celebration, and for your ongoing partnership with the Santa Barbara school districts and this and other endeavors, which serves as serving Santa Barbara youth, which is a model within our state of California. So thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you, Teresa. And I think we see why she leads so well. She's always bolstering everyone up.
And Commission, I think that I would like to tag on to what Teresa said, because I have gained such an appreciation for the collaboration that the City of Santa Barbara has with our school district. And as Teresa mentioned, it is not a successful model in most communities. And so it is a very unique partnership that, because both agencies may very intentionally protect it and they work on it, it really works. And so as you travel to other communities, you know, when you mentioned do you have a joint use agreement with your school district, 9 times out of 10 people roll their eyes. But we really have a good working model, and this is a really good demonstration of that, and I want to thank all of the district personnel for their participation as well. It really is 2 partners who have a commitment to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, this is a big day for us here, and we will now move to our next item, which is another one that's a little bit hard.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, at your last meeting when we announced that Billy Goodnick would be retiring, you asked that we put this on your agenda so that you could recognize Billy and his contributions over the years. I'd like to give an overview because I think, you know, Billy, partly because of his profession as a landscape architect, and in the last 5 years has been the supervisor of the project management team, building many of our capital projects, and mostly because of who he is and his passion for Parks and Recreation. Billy has left his fingerprints on a lot of the facilities and parks that we are all so proud of and that so many people in the community enjoy. So I just kind of made a list of the things that I was aware of myself. I actually had to get some assistance from people who were here in the early years of Billy's career when I was not a member of the department, but it just is a very impressive list of projects that Billy has had a major role in. Andre Clark Bird Refuge, as we know it today, was one of Billy's projects. The East Beach Pedestrian Bridge down in that same area, the Ledbetter Group Picnic Area improvements. One of the first projects that Billy worked on was playgrounds for children. At one point, nearly half of the city's park playgrounds were not up to code, and Billy and Jeff Cope and Richard Johns undertook a massive project to raise funds and work with the community and built 10 playgrounds, one of those being Kids World. Parque de los Niños on the Lower West Side, the Chase Palm Park expansion, Stork Placida renovations 1 and 2, Skaters Point, which was really Billy's heart for many years, the Sensory Garden and low water use demonstration garden at Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden, the Muni Driving Range, the Oak Park Bridge, Ortega Park sports field improvements, the Teen Center, and most recently the Bonet Park expansion. And there were a number of policy areas and administrative projects that Billy led. He was involved in the creation of the PR zone for the city and zoning all of our parks and protecting our parks in that way. The State Street design guidelines, the recreation field study, which studied athletic fields for the whole South Coast community, the Muni Golf Course Landscaping and Tree Master Plan, the Major Aquatic Complex Study, the Franceschi Park Master Plan, and over the years he was the liaison to the Franceschi Park Advisory Committee and also the Douglas Family Preserve Committee. In 2006, Billy received our Outstanding Service Award for the work that he did in creating the project management team to move the department's capital projects forward. And I think that I was trying to think of words that to me really define how Billy works. His outstanding professionalism, his humor, his creativity, his passion for horticulture and landscape design, his humor, again, because you just don't get anything else without the humor, his energy and his passion for parks and recreation, and he will be missed. And as you know, we are doing a big barbecue in the Parks Yard tomorrow where we'll celebrate Billy, but as commissioners, these are all of the different areas where Billy has touched what we do and what we have and what we offer the community.
Mr. Goodnick. You have to come up. But I've been on the commission a long time, and before that I was on the Lower West Side Advisory Committee, which is the first time I think I worked with Billy, was when we did Parque de los Niños. And that was such an important project to the whole neighborhood, and Billy brought to it such creativity. One of the things I remember the most, besides the tiles, was when you described the colors of the bougainvillea on the train wall, which is a pretty ugly thing. I mean, if you think about the train and the cyclone fence, and you know, Billy's vision was beautiful, and it was fun, and it respected the neighborhood and brought in color and things that needed to be there, and there was always that whimsy and creativity that was wonderful. And then he had the vision for the tiles, which was a massive project of moving children from McKinley School to the art museum and then having them paint tiles and then installing them. And, you know, to this day, it makes that park a unique part of our community. And I appreciate it every time I walk by it and I see my tile in it. The skateboard park. Oh, my goodness. Did we ever think we were going to finish that? I think it was my first year on the commission that we bought the land for the Bonet Park expansion. And thank God you stayed through to the end of that one. It's just been a delight. I think sometimes you're like trying to stick a square peg in a round hole. You're in this bureaucracy, and you keep doing it. And I appreciated that so much. And I enjoyed working with you on every one of the subcommittees and every project. And I will miss your sense of humor, although it's not always a good thing to have us in the same room together.
You can read it online these days.
But I know I will miss your energy. So, but I'm glad to have had it for all the years, and I know we will see it in the community all over the place, because I know you're going to go on and do more things. So, does anybody else
Thank
have
you.
anything? I know Ada's been.
Well, listening to Nancy talk about all the things you've done is like a walk down memory lane. I'm going to choke up.
Oh,
One of my
I don't have a handkerchief for you.
sorry about this. One of my favorite things about the commission was listening to your reports. They were always uplifting and fun, and you had so much to say and so much that you'd done. And I just really appreciate working with you over these years. It's
Thank
been
you,
great.
Ada.
I'm really going to miss you.
I'm around. I'm not going anywhere.
Thank you.
Drum roll.
Like you're the drum roll. I know. The drum roll isn't me. One-handed drum rolls just don't work.
Apologize to the TV crew.
Well, this says, in appreciation, City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department presented to Billy Goodnick this 24th day of June 2009 for 20 years of dedicated service to the
22.
Parks and Recreation Department.
1.7.
Okay. I'll get the
I
white
forgot
out.
to go back and fix it.
Santa Barbara community for creating beautiful, engaging parks, facilities, and landscapes for children, families, residents, and visitors to enjoy, and for sharing your love of horticulture with staff, park visitors, and people in the community. And that's the other thing I wanted to add. You were one of the first people that really advocated for accessibility. I just remember dealing with you when we were designing things, and you always brought up accessibility, and I appreciate that. So,
Yeah, I'll take one of those.
thanks.
Yours later. Thank you. Very cool. Nancy mentioned my fingerprints. I'll clean them up before you process the PAF cleanup. I get to talk until the band starts playing and you go to commercial. That'll be good.
No, we got a giant hook.
I just have some thank yous. First, family, my wife Lynn, who's back here, who, of course, supported and boosted and helped organize kids' projects and plantings and got our son and all his classes out there and had a hand in things too. And my son Ben, who tested out all the playgrounds before they were officially open to the public, and I think is the first kid to walk to the bottom of the lagoon at Chase Palm Park expansion before it had water in it. I'm a good dad. And to my dad, who when I got out of, where did I go to school? Cal Poly, said the most boring thing I've ever heard. He said, get yourself a government job. Because I was already 35 years old when I got out of school. But he was right, because it's a good place to be. Back through my memory lane, I started when we were two departments, when there was a Parks Department and a Recreation Department. Jerry Ambrose was in charge, and for whatever reason, he was having a bad day, but hired me. And that was when Parks and Recreation was all nuts and bolts. It was about making sure the sprinklers worked and all that sort of stuff. So I really got a good experience just being on the ground and doing what needed to support the department. Richard Johns has left his fingerprints, and he cleans up after himself too. Richard's role was just being such an advocate for Parks and Recreation throughout the community, and all the tendrils he had out throughout the United States, and all the richness that he brought back, I think really helped our department. And to use a horticultural analogy, a great root system for us. And then when Nancy came in, it was a wonderful change. Richard, I love everything that Richard did, but Nancy saw us as a family and constantly works to make sure everything's working together. I think we really became a Parks and Recreation Department, and that chasm between the 401 East Ortega and 620 Laguna that at times seemed like the Grand Canyon just kept getting smaller and smaller and put us all back together. So I think that's great. And Jill, my newest boss, who is great at taking the broad view and also just getting down to the details to the point where I actually created the impression of knowing what I was doing eventually with the project management team. Over on the park side, which is where I started off, a big thank you to Terry Yamada, who's not here and is going through some important family stuff right now. I was trying to think of, other than couple of guys out in the yard. The people who were here when I started, I think we're down to Mark Roush, and maybe a couple guys on the tree crew like Jesse and all that. But we've pretty much processed everybody through. Santos has been a great help, and Steve Takai and all those guys over at Parks. I left off Jeff Cope because he was and still is kind of my soulmate. I think he was the heart of horticulture for our department, and although that's we just don't have the resources to do it the way we have in the past, this is my one admonition to the community or whoever's watching. We need more rabid horticulturists in our community. I think we don't cherish our parks enough. We don't speak out for them enough. They're just kind of an afterthought, and they're there. But we need the same people who go out and scream about roundabouts to find that kind of passion and scream about our parks. Real quickly, as Nancy said, I had my fingerprints on things, but there's no one thing, I can take any credit for. It's always collaboration, whether it's people acting as sandpaper to make things a little bit easier. A big thank you to John Schoaf, who just left us last week. He was my mentor putting the project management team together, and now I'm getting choked up. Pat Kelly, everybody else at engineering who makes us look good, the project managers, the inspectors who make sure projects get built right and have the real technical knowledge. Everybody on the recreation side who I still don't understand. I don't know that we're all of the same species because I can't do what they do in terms of recreation and programmings and making special events happen. And also community development. I mean, that was the big three, is working with Public Works, community development, and the recreation people. Folks like Don Olson and Betty, Hennon Weiss, whoever she's back to, Jan Hubble, made it easier and made it fathomable. And everybody over at RDA who keeps writing us checks. I'm just happy I got to provide benefit to the community when it gets into discussions with other landscape architects. I know they've got these big glamorous projects that I never get my hands around, but there's just something about driving around town and seeing some of the good that you do. The high points, you mentioned the biggest one to me, Parque de los Niños. I would guess 95% of the people in Santa Barbara have no idea what it is or where it is, but it's a really important park. And the new expansion of Bonet was huge for me. Also Skateboard Park, and just being involved through all of the massive budget cuts going through Chase Palm Park expansion, taking $1 million out here and there, and realizing we still had a really cool park. That's kind of it for me. I'm selling my Kick Me sign on eBay. It's going up next week. It's part of public service. Either that or Smithsonian's going to want it. I don't know. And my biggest threat to Nancy is be careful or I might come back as a commissioner someday.
Oh.
Make your life a living hell. So thank you for this. Thanks for 21.7 years. I think we can fix that. We'll get that fixed. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy.
Starts again at Dargan's 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, that brings us to Commissioner Committee Assignment Reports. Does anyone have any? Mr. Burns.
I was going to mention the Arts and Crafts Commission, and the biggest news there is Judith Cook, who's no longer going to be there. But I don't know if that's going to be under staff report later or not.
That was part of our Recreation Division reorganization, so Judith will no longer be the staff liaison to the Arts and Crafts Show, and Jason Bryan will be taking that on.
Okay.
It was just to be said that at the Commission, the Arts and Crafts, it was that she will be missed, and they enjoyed having her and all of her expertise over the last 10 years, 11 years. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Longstreet. I also have a report on the Creeks Committee. You may have seen in the report on council actions that the Las Positas golf course restoration is now under contract. I believe Shaw Construction is going to be building that project. We also had a report on the Laguna Watershed and the Laguna Watershed study and feasibility, as well as I look forward to the 2010 water monitoring plan.
Well, I would just tag on to, yesterday I did attend the stakeholders meeting for the golf project, and it will start construction next week. I would encourage people to keep abreast of it on the website. The golf course has a website, and they will provide updated information on what's going on at the moment with the construction, and there will be biweekly meetings also. So it was very interesting. I think they've got a great plan for the work and with limited amount of interruption to people. So, and then I know a number of us attended some budget meetings with the advisory committees and teams. So I guess that ends that. And Commission and Staff Communications, do we have anything?
Chair Longstreet, I thought that I would provide the Commission just a quick recap on a couple of things that have taken place since your last meeting. Yesterday, the City Council adopted the FY10 budget. I did provide for you a copy of the media release that went out today that really just gives some highlights. The two changes that took place affecting our budget from what was proposed. What was proposed was for the Waterfront Department to cover 100% of the cost to provide the beach lifeguard service, which was $147,000, and that was reduced to 50% of that amount of money. So our budget will be adjusted in that way. And then we had one position restored in Council's desire to not have employees be laid off. And we had one employee who had still not found other employment, and so her position was restored. And then I think probably more importantly, the focus of the discussion was on the last reports for sales tax and the TOT. And currently we're projecting that our revenues for FY10 are already going to be off by about $1.5 million. And then what the FY10 budget was, we were able to develop a balanced budget with relying on over $3 million of one-time measures to reach our goal. So as we look at the coming year, we will probably, we're looking at knowing that we're about $5 million off for the year. We'll really start looking at reductions and watching both. Personally, in our department, we'll be watching our revenues closely to make sure that we're staying where we need to be, but as the city general fund moves forward, if revenues continue to decline, we'll be looking at additional reductions over the year. And then we will be having more discussions as we prepare for the following year, FY11. So in contrast to past years, I would imagine that the Commission will be having more discussions as we look at possibly having to cut even deeper into parks and recreation services.
I would think that we probably need to develop a schedule of possibly work sessions at least quarterly for the Commission to keep abreast of what's going on. And, I'd like to be aware of where staff is looking at cuts, and just so we know.
The Commission has an item on your agenda, number 9, which is Commission priorities, and that's where I thought that the Commission might have some discussion about that. Additionally, I wanted to let you know that the Council did move forward the language that the Commission recommended for the Charter Amendment, which would include the youth vote for a youth 16 years or older, and then increasing the Commission to 7 members, combining the 2 commissions, Parks and Recreation Commission, and and that the details of the youth vote, the youth member of the commission, that will work that out and bring it to City Council as an ordinance recommendation. And that is something that would follow once the charter amendment is approved, and if it's approved, then we'll proceed with that.
Okay.
And Chair Longstreet mentioned the meeting that we had with the 3 community center advisory committees to talk about the neighborhood and outreach services. So I wanted to let you know that was an extremely positive meeting. They were very supportive of moving the concept forward. And we talked about some next steps, which would be a joint meeting with the Youth Council, the 3 advisory committees, and the Commission. And so one of the things that the Commission might think about, too, is whether to form a subcommittee with perhaps members from each of those groups to meet on a more regular basis with staff to move this concept further. So. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Billy mentioned something, and I did want to mention it too, that just to acknowledge the passing of John Schoaf and the fact that he did contribute a lot to our department. He was a joy to work with, and that I'm really sorry to hear of his death. So that brings us to the Youth Council report. Diego, we're making you work through the summer.
Thank you. There's not too much that we've been doing right now because since we're getting a new Youth Council, but we actually did fill those spots. We're having 2 actually vacancies right now because we want those to be representatives from DP because we want them all to be diverse with all the schools. And so we have just 2 slots vacancy right now. But our first meeting with our new members is going to be in just coming up the 1st of July. And then they, I guess Hannah must have pointed a little bit on the teen exchange a little bit. That's going to be in August that we're hosting. Where I forget how much, about like 15 agencies are going to be coming over here, and what we're going to be doing is we're just building together and just to form ideas and see how other youth like us are doing in other places, and just it's just going to be like a bond with each other. And I know we were thinking of just it's going to probably be a lunch and then workshops basically. So that should be fun. And then I think that's about it. Also the Teen Center is actually throwing a dance this Friday at the Creo Center that's called the Salsa Night for everybody. And it's going to be a benefit for the Teen Center to raise money. And so that's this Friday and begins at 8. So.
Thank you. Consent calendar, we have summary of council actions. Are there any questions on that for staff? Approval of minutes. We have minutes of May 27th, 2009 to approve.
I move to approve the minutes of May 27th.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now we are to trees. Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Mr. Downey. You see, are you here for a tree item? Which one? Murphy. Oh, okay, the last one. All righty. Thank you. Usually, she's getting you a little form to fill out. Good. So we have a record that you were here. Mr. Downey, first item is 921 Arbolado Road.
Commissioner Longstreet and committee members, the trees at 921 Arbolado Road are 2 liquid amber trees, 2 Monterey pines, and one Arizona cypress that the two liquid ambers have been topped. They're in poor condition. The picture in front of you is the liquid ambers. The Monterey pines and the Arizona cypress are in poor condition. The reasons were that they were poorly trimmed and removal would benefit native oak trees in the space. Street Advisory Committee and staff determined that the removal of the trees, as well as the remaining liquid amber and pittosporum shrubs, would greatly benefit the remaining oak trees. Street Advisory Committee and staff are concerned that if these trees are not removed, they will take over the space as these existing trees have. Therefore, Street Advisory Committee and staff recommend approval of the removals on the condition they also remove the remaining liquid amber and pittosporums.
Any questions for staff? I went out and looked at the site, and I agree. I mean, I see the point of it. There are some nice oaks there that are really kind of crowded out of the whole area. So, motion?
I move that we agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee and staff to let the removal take place on 6A1, 921 Arbolado.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, next is 2050 Garden Street.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, the tree at 2050 Garden Street is a camphor tree. The reasons stated were the site is on the list of potential historic resources, and they are in the midst of restoring the property back to historically pertinent building. In doing so, the front porch used to wrap around the front of the property, and repairs need to be made to the footings in that area so that they can rebuild that porch. That rebuild will cause significant root loss in the tree. The tree was planted sometime after historic significance of the property. Street Advisory Committee and staff recommend that the removal be approved on the condition that they plant another tree within the setback that is historically appropriate as determined by the Historic Landmark Commission.
Questions for staff? Motion?
Move concurrence with staff and Street Tree Committee on this is 6A2.
Second. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, and that brings us to denials. First, we have 102 East Pueblo Street.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, 102 East Pueblo Street is an Italian stone pine that is grown adjacent to another clump of pines. The reasons stated were that it was lifting the street and a driveway, and that there was concerns that because of the lien it would become a liability later on. Upon my inspection of the tree, I determined that there were no safety issues regarding whether this tree should be removed or not. The root pruning can occur and the tree remains safe. The Street Tree Advisory Committee and staff determined the reasons were not valid for removal of the tree and recommend denial.
Yeah, thank you. Questions?
Yeah, just one question. They were only trying to remove one of the trees. There was another tree right next to it. That wasn't correct?
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner, there is another group of trees. There are different species than this one. The Street Advisory Committee felt that the loss of this tree would not really benefit those other trees because of the way that they grow, and felt that the tree had value and should remain.
I'd like to make a motion to uphold the committee and staff recommendation to deny this removal at 102 East Pueblo Street.
Okay, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 621 Ricardo.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, 621 Ricardo is a Washington Robusta Mexican fan palm adjacent to the driveway. The reasons stated were that they want to provide more space off-street for parking, and the tree's location restricts the ability for them to park on that side of the driveway. The street advisor community staff determined that that there may be room on the other side of the driveway to expand the driveway to provide more parking. Street Advisory Committee staff recommend denial and recommend that the applicant explore expanding the driveway in the other direction.
Okay, Mr. Murphy, would you like to come up and speak to this item?
Sure, I'd appreciate a chance to speak to the item. I wasn't aware of the process and didn't realize, what I would have to defend or not defend about my desire to remove this tree. So I may be a little bit all over the place. I just jotted some notes down. First of all, I don't think I can expand my driveway on the left side because as it is now, a normal car like the Civic that I own can barely get up this driveway. It's an extreme slope, and when you come up across the sidewalk and start to go up, you scrape the front just barely. And when you go into the garage, you almost bottom out. So, they built it just right, but if I move to the left because the street goes like this, I'll be encountering additional grade, which would make it very difficult. As it is now, I have to come in on that side of my driveway to get up, because if I come in on the left, I'll scrape too much. So I don't think that the slope of this street allows that. And the picture does not adequately convey how steep it is. So if that's the the only point of argument, perhaps I could leave it at there. But I didn't realize an objection would come up. I thought it was just a formality to follow the rules to notify that I wanted to do this. But if I'm in the position of adding to arguments for why, I'd like to list a few, and I'm not sure this is the most important order, but take what you will and toss out what you don't agree with. I think it's an ugly tree. These things are habitats for rats, and I've had to keep clear. I cleared out all the shrubbery that was around it because so many rats live in there and go up and down the tree. That they quickly produce these dried fronds which can fall, and about 40 or 50 of them came down once right beside my wife and getting out of her car, which parks on the street. And I think how dangerous that can be. You keep them trimmed around the city because people can get hurt. And I now spend a lot of money keeping it trimmed up there, but it's always getting new ones that fall. I don't really like the tree. I'd like to get rid of it whether I was expanding my driveway or not. I'd like to expand my driveway and replace what's a very ugly, cracked asphalt thing from 1962 when the house was built, and spend a lot of money on pavers and beautify the neighborhood. I don't think my neighbors are going to mind that this big stick is blocking their ocean view. If that was removed, I think they'd be very pleased. We're not denuding the neighborhood of trees. I myself own 10 trees over 60 feet, some 100 feet, that are all Monterey pines and stone pines. And I spent a lot of money keeping those things trimmed and properly managed, and this isn't even in context with those trees. It detracts from the beauty of all those wonderful Monterey pines. This is the view from my front yard. There's a stick there in front of my view of UCSB. It's the exact same view my neighbor has because we're just stair-stepped up the hill. So that's just a big stick right in their view window. I don't think these trees work real well for beautifying a neighborhood when they get above a certain height, because you have to go like this to see the top of them. You just see the dead bottom of it.
Okay, is that about sum it up, or?
I don't know. I think my list goes
No, I mean,
on, actually. If I do put in a new driveway and it remains, I won't have the additional width I wanted, and I'm afraid that it's going to continue to grow and crack the driveway. I have to ask what the life of one of these things is. Isn't there a lifetime?
Well,
and
I guess what I would say at this point is we don't take out live and healthy trees on the theory that you're going to do something. That would come under, and correct me if I'm wrong, an approved plan with a permit that has a removal and a planting plan to replenish the tree. Isn't that what we would look at, Mr. Downey?
In other cases, Chair Longstreet, we have postponed a decision until the applicant had a permit for the work that they were doing. And typically in those instances, we've requested information about what it would be replaced with, correct?
And you're showing me a permit for redoing your driveway?
Yeah, I've paid for the permit to redo my driveway.
So, and does it include any landscape plans, or are you going to replace the tree that goes in there?
I planned to landscape steps up the left side of the driveway after the pavers are in, a series of steps and plantings and boulders along the left.
I would feel more comfortable if we possibly continued this so that the Street Tree Advisory Committee could look at this permitted plan and work a little bit with that rather than, I mean, it seems like we're sort of in the middle of something that I'm uncomfortable with. We don't have enough information. I don't think the Street Tree Advisory Committee had a plan to look at. Did they? No. Okay. I would hope that then we would continue it. And I am not guaranteeing you that you will get the response you want, Mr. Murphy. I just want to assure you of that.
What can I
also
do to
want
get the
wait.
response I want?
Wait. You don't always get the response you want. No. How it works is it's up to the commission, but my recommendation would be that we postpone this and send it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee with your what the plans you took in to get your permit. I would advise you to have a planting plan of some sort available to them for replacement of the tree.
Meaning I need to plant some other tree.
Usually that's the way it goes. I am also going to tell you that whatever decision comes out of this commission at the end is appealable to City Council within 10 days. We are, so that's the other part of it. But I'm not going there now. What I'm telling you is that I'd like it to go back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee with your plans, because they didn't have all the information. And typically we do not take out healthy trees on the theory that someone may do something, because we hear a lot of, I don't like the tree, it's ugly, it's this, it's that. And then we lose a mature tree within our community, and that's our job, is to keep mature trees and to protect the urban forests. So
yeah,
that's okay.
I see. Yeah, I just pictured as some sort of quid pro quo. We want the net benefit to the city, to the community, to be positive. That's what we're looking for.
Yes, and that's why we protect the tree, because that is a great benefit. All trees are a benefit to our community. And so it is back to the commission now.
a question. I thought I saw that house. I thought I stopped by the house. Isn't there 2 more trees in your front lawn that are identical to that almost? Okay. Because that picture doesn't quite show it, that it's a very high, steep grade. And I guess I'm agreeing is that if there's a plan showing that how it will be, how your plan will go, I looked at this and said, it's a nice tree, but there's 2 more just like it, just 20 feet away, and it looked very awkward. So I was going to agree with what your issues are, but I also feel we need to put it back and get some more information to us.
Great. Well, I'll try to highlight that situation in subsequent material I submit, because definitely right in my front yard, there's 2 even larger than this that have both grown straight, and this is grown so that it hangs out and has one of those awkward angles, and it does detract from the overall landscape.
Okay, thank you. And now it is back to the commission.
And I agree with bringing it back to the committee and having it represented.
Okay, so do I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to postpone this item to a future time when we are presented with more overall plans, including landscape plans for the site.
And I'll send it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
Yes,
Right.
what she said.
Okay. Second. All right. Any discussion of that item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you. And so it's going to go back. They're going to come out and visit. So you'll work with Mr. Downey.
Who do I speak to for next steps?
Mr. Downey.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's the man who'll take care of you. Thanks. Okay, that brings us to administrative and staff reports. Update on the upcoming summer special events.
Chair Longstreet and Commission, each year we try to just take advantage of the opportunity to say, hey, it's summer. And so Judith Cook is here to talk to you briefly about the July 4th celebration and, of course, our summer concerts in the parks.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I'm Judith Cook McCaffrey, and Recreation Manager. It's okay. I'm still getting used to being married, as are my colleagues, so that's okay. I'm here to tell you about some great anticipated summer events we have coming up. I'm still kind of in denial. I can't believe that it's actually summer and kids are out of school, but they are, and we've got some really fun things planned. First off, our 11th season of Concerts in the Park will be starting July 2nd, Thursday nights in Chase Palm Park. This summer we'll have 5 concerts, so all 5 Thursdays in July, free to the public from 6 to 8:30. Our opening concert this year is Santa Barbara's favorite dance band, the Soul City Survivors. So if you enjoy great soul music, we invite you to come out. As you've noticed, our season's a little shortened this year due to some of our budget reductions. We won't be having any concerts in Alameda Park this summer, but in the next year we'll be looking for more corporate sponsors, more grants, and more donations to hopefully return our series back to its size and scope this next summer. So I want to just briefly highlight some of the other groups that we have, and then I'll talk about 4th of July and the Children's Parade. Here's a beautiful Chase Palm Park, and you can see it on a very, very popular evening. Some of our groups this summer include a new group, the Johnny Hawthorne Band. Johnny is a wonderful blues musician, and he'll be our second concert this summer. Of course, we have the season favorite every summer is Captain Cardiac and the Coronaries that will be playing our next concert. We'll have some great Latin music by Tony Ibarra and Sonita Moreno. And last, we'll end with one of our Santa Barbara's own, Spencer the Gardener. So we invite the public to come out on Thursdays to Chase Palm Park and enjoy this great family series. Of course, I can't stop talking about the concerts until I thank our generous sponsors, because without their generosity and their loyalty, this series wouldn't return every year. So I want to say a special thank you to the Tobes Foundation for a generous grant we received this year, K-Light and K-Tide, Santa Barbara Independent, XL5 Productions, sbparent.com, and Santa Barbara Family Life magazine, as well as many of the concert attendees who have generously given to us donations every summer. I want to thank them so much for their support. All right. Let's talk about 4th of July that's coming up. The last few months, city staff from a number of different departments and volunteers from Sparkle have been working together to plan our 2009 celebration on West Beach. 4th of July is on a Saturday this year, so we're expecting some big crowds. Starting at 12 noon, there are plenty of food and beverage vendors down on West Beach. And at 7 p.m. that night, our entertainment begins with the Air National Guard Band of the Southwest. When that band takes a little intermission, at 8 p.m., Santa Barbara's own Dave Gonzalez will be entertaining. So I know we all enjoy his wonderful performances. At 9 p.m. will be the fireworks show. As I mentioned, we are expecting large crowds, so we encourage the public to utilize the MTD bus and shuttles to get down to the waterfront, and you can find that information and those schedules at sbmtd.com. Of course, I've got to mention a couple other 4th of July events that are going on that day. Parks and Recreation's own Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show. We'll have a holiday show on the 4th of July from 10 a.m. to dusk in their normal location along Cabrillo Boulevard. So come on down. We have about 180 artisans and craftspeople from Santa Barbara County that will be showing. The 4th of July parade will be at 1 p.m. And the Santa Barbara Symphony will be performing their annual concert at 5 p.m. at the Sunken Gardens. And actually this year they're joined by the Santa Barbara Choral Society, so it should be a great concert. And last but not least, one of our great department events is the Children's Fiesta Parade that'll be coming up in August, Saturday, August 8th. It's the 79th annual this year. It's free to participate, and we're looking forward to about 2,500 children and their families signing up for the parade. The applications are available now, and the deadline is July 1st, or July 10th. We're also looking for community volunteers to help with organizing the parade on Parade Day. So we'll be hoping to get some calls for people who might be interested. It's a lot of fun. And lastly, for any more information you can on all these events, you can find that on our website. I can see there's a W off our web address there, but it's www.sbparksandrecreation.com, or you can call our office at 897-1982. Anyone had any questions? I'd be happy to take those now. And thank you very much.
Questions? Yes, Mr. Byrne.
If someone was trying to sponsor and donate money, what number would they call? The same number?
They'd call that very same number and speak with me, Judith McCaffrey. And we certainly do place advertisements. We mention all our sponsors at every one of our concerts and feature their logos in our advertisements and our press releases. So they do get quite a bit of publicity for their generosity.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, we look forward to all these great events and know it's very hard to believe that it's almost July already. To old business, Parks and Recreation Facility Tour.
Commissioners, previously you've discussed your interest in having staff coordinate a tour of some of our facilities. Staff did a bit of brainstorming, and we have some suggestions, but what we wanted to do tonight was to have you kind of identify the things that would be of interest to you so that we can then plan a tour. And typically what we would do is either look at something that we would do in the late afternoon for a couple of hours, or a Saturday morning for a couple of hours. We have also in the past extended the invitation to council members, letting them know that the commission is doing a facility tour and they can join us if they like. So let me just share with you some of the things that staff talked about, and then feel free to express an interest in things that you have more interest in. We thought that since we're really going to have a focus on Shoreline Park this year, looking at what the plan is, what the recommendations are, Shoreline Park would be a natural. Ms. Zachary recommended that maybe we do something on the front country trails, particularly in all the burn areas, talking about restoration and protection of the trails. So that was one idea. With the Mesa Lane steps, we did our funding to begin the replacement of Mesa Lane steps is still in the capital budget. That's going to be a multi-year project because we'll have to go out for grant funding for the bulk of the repairs. We thought maybe if the commissioners have not recently visited the 3 beach access areas that we have, we thought that that might be good to really look at shoreline steps, which were redone, I think, in 2001, and then Mesa Lane steps, and then Thousand Steps, thank you. Because they each have their Thousand Steps and Mesa Lane have their challenges. So thought about that. We've added a new butterfly garden at the Alice Keck Park, and that's been a project with the Botanic Garden Master Gardening Program. And we've had some, concerns come up related to park maintenance at Alice Keck Park, and certainly we'll continue to see some of the struggles that we have to maintain our beautiful parks with the resources that we have. So Alice Keck was mentioned. Additionally, if the Commission wanted to visit some of the improvements that have been done in the last few months, the Muni Sound Wall at associated with the 101 project, we could drive by and see that. Bonnet Park expansion, I'm not sure that all of you have been there since it opened. There have been some planting projects to improve the DFP. Some of you have attended those events. We didn't know if maybe that would be of interest. And the Creeks Advisory Committee is going to be doing a tour of the golf course project, and we thought instead of doing something separate with the Commission, that when that date was decided, we would extend the invitation to you so that you could do a tour of that project with the Creeks Advisory Committee. The other facility that we want to plan a site visit to is the Carrillo Recreation Center. And what we thought we would do, and this is jumping the gun a bit, but the Carrillo Recreation Center is likely to begin sometime in September. And we anticipate that the Commission and the joint meeting that we talked about for the Neighborhood and Outreach Services would take place before then. And we thought maybe we would just have that meeting at the Carrillo Recreation Center and then have Jason Bryan do a tour for the Commission just a half hour before. And that way you can walk the facility and get a sense of all the work that's going to take place and the improvements to the facility so that we didn't have to do a separate thing. So, and I think one of the other parks that Mr. Escobar mentioned was Schofield Park. And so those are just some of the things that we thought of. There may be things that are of particular interest to you. What we'll try and do is take, because we can do quite a few different sites in that same time period. I'm always amazed at how much we can squeeze into a couple of hours. So I wanted to just kind of kick that discussion off for you.
Comments?
Thank you, Chair Longstreet, Mr. Rapp. My initial comment is that all of it sounds great. I'd love to see that. I also know that there are a number of parks that I'm not really familiar with that are in our inventory. But my preference would be to weight our tours towards things that are going to be coming on our agenda with preparations for those agenda items. So that would be my real preference. I think it's great to see work that we've done. But I think it's more productive for our time to go someplace where we know that there's going to be a decision to be made and be briefed on that decision at the site.
I was especially interested in the front country trails and the burn areas. I think that would be good. It sounds like you were pretty thorough in all the facilities and parks that you mentioned, but I can't think of anything above and beyond, but I am interested in Front Country Trails and Carrillo Building.
Diego, did you have? Okay. Scott?
Just a couple of comments on the Front Country Trails. I think would be very worthwhile. I was with I think a multi-Front Country task force that did some cleaning a few weeks ago on a Saturday with probably 80 or 90 people. And there is a lot of work needing to be done and a lot of work that had to be done, and amazing the damage also. But some other things I'd like to see that we look at is some of the buildings that are in our inventory are a step above decrepit. And if we're going to try to get the city council to put money into capital improvement, it'd be nice if more of us got to see why it's an issue and why we need to spend money on it. And I don't know which ones we'd talk about, but just to keep that in mind. The other thing is Franceschi, the building, which at Franceschi Park, the house there. I mean, we haven't done anything, and I don't know if we've got. If I'm opening up a can of worms with this, but it's something needs to be done, and it's not very pretty. So and maybe that'll get something that we can look at. But whatever you come up with, I will attend.
Yeah, I think we have 2 tours, and it sort of melds into commission priorities with the facilities. I see that is coming there. I think it would be good. I like including Alice Keck in this because that is going to be the one area not the one, is one of the areas that we're going to have the most trouble maintaining, and is going to show the results of budget cuts, I think, the fastest. And we have a sizable investment in it. We're really looking like a building at protecting the investment. So it's going to be one I think that we need to keep track of. I'd like to see what's there now. I'm also concerned there's, safety issues and things that happen there that we just need to be aware of. I think we can nicely move Shoreline and Mesa, the steps, the beach access. That's a pretty that'll go quickly in the Front Country Trails. And I think we have a second tour a little farther down the line for facilities, simply facilities, and that would be kind of the way I'd like to do it. If we can sort of meld into the priorities right now, I see us needing to form a subcommittee, a facility subcommittee, to start really brainstorming and working with the report that your committee generated to come up with some recommendations for council. I know that there's no money floating on the horizon, but again, we're in this position where we need to get these projects shovel ready because we don't know when money may come down, and we need to be ready to go. So I think it's going to be a priority for us in the next year as a commission. So I'd like to really emphasize that. So I think you have our recommendations as far as a tour. Yeah.
I just wanted to add the Cabrillo Bathhouse to the facility tour.
The facilities, yeah. Okay. So do you have enough from us to schedule a tour?
Chair Longstreet, the discussion of the Front Country Trails, I wanted to check and see whether the commission would have interest in visiting Parma Park to just see some of the restoration and to talk about some of the restoration and all of that. Would that also be?
Yes.
If we can fit that in? Okay.
Yes. Parma's so important because it's really, to me, our model of open space park because it has the endowment and things happen there. It's what we would like to be able to do everywhere. Okay. So that brings us to new business, our commission priorities for 2010. I think it would be really beneficial, especially in this year, to have some priorities. I would also say our priorities have to be realistic of staff time within this cutbacks, that we don't spin our wheels or theirs. So I would like to kick it off by saying my first priority is budget, is staying aware of budget, of having some input early on as a commission on where those cuts come. We know they're coming, but to be able to really look at it early on, not as late as we do in the regular budget process, but to have some input. So.
Tag in on that. And another item that we talked about earlier was the changing of the youth council so that it's also working with the community center advisory councils. Mm-hmm. And at the meetings I've been at, youth council has always seemed to be school-based, and the advisory community centers seem to be more location-based. And we need to work with both of those groups, or all four of the groups, to make sure that they work together well. And they're ending up right now at two different positions, and we just need to make sure they come together. So some sort of joint meetings we ought to plan for and keep those going.
If I might make the suggestion to reframe that, I think that's all about neighborhood and outreach services. And I also do want to be clear, we're not, in all of our discussions of neighborhood and outreach services, we are not proposing changes to the youth council. I think it's more about how do we incorporate the goals of the neighborhood and outreach services with youth council. So I want to be careful how we phrase that, because the youth council works, and so we're not really.
Correct.
Yeah.
Maybe I might have misspoke, but there seemed to be from the advisory commissions, the neighborhood advisory commissions, a expectation that youth council would suddenly change and do whatever they wanted, and that's not really the case. And so we want to make sure we keep all the expectations correct.
Yes.
And I think we'll have a clearer picture after we have a joint meeting. But I do like the idea of a subcommittee, of a working subcommittee to move this forward. It's a little bit awkward to do it with 50 people in the room. And it may be if we have 8 to 10, we might make some really good progress on it. So I think that would be a priority, would be to get the meeting happening and then create a subcommittee for that, and then to create a facility subcommittee that starts to address some of our infrastructure issues. Those would be my priorities for the year. But we haven't heard from this half. Others?
I'll go ahead and make a comment that I think it's, as a new commissioner, it's really tough for me to really determine what my priorities would be for the coming year, especially without, say, a list of what some possible areas might be. So I'm just going to listen to my fellow commissioners and see what comes up.
And I would just say that, you were here for all the budget issues, so I think you really do know. I mean, you have a good handle on what we're facing and what's at risk. I think is really where the focus is going to be this year. Is how do we do with less, and what can we do to support the staff, not make it make it worse, but actually come up with some innovations and outreach of our own to make things happen. Commissioner Connor?
I agree with that. Mainly, what happened in the budget cycle was really important and very telling about where our things that we're going to need to focus on will lie. So I agree with Commissioner Longstreet about the fact that we need to know what's happening budget-wise and where we stand so that we can be as helpful as possible as we move forward. And I would say that's going to be in and of itself quite a major monitoring task, because I see a lot happening in the next year. I won't be here, but I would like to make sure that it's all monitored and the Commission's aware.
Well, I think we're looking at a time now where it's going to be some philosophical changes. We're past the cuts and just making the organization more lean. We're looking at philosophical program cuts at this next round, and I think that's where we come in to be involved is, are we closing buildings? Are we closing parks? What are we doing? So if it's as dire, if it continues to be as dire in the next few months, that's where we're at.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, staff has had a bit of discussion about this too, because we know that if we're going into further reductions, it really is getting into the meat and potatoes, and so some of the things that that we talked about that the Commission might want to really look at would be maybe in the first part of starting fiscal year 10, begin to think about how the Commission could work with staff in some kind of a process to prioritize services that the department provides. And so as we are having to make reductions, there's involvement in terms of prioritizing, what we look at first. We tried to do that this year. And if you'll remember, we prioritized keeping our parks safe, clean, and green, and keeping as many facilities open as possible. But we really didn't talk a lot about, the value of different programs across the board. And truly, I think for us, if in fact, and maybe the economy is turning around and it won't be quite as bad, but if in fact we're looking at reductions similar to what we did last year, I think we're at the place where we really start talking about what we're not going to do anymore, not just trimming all the programs a little bit. And I think those are more difficult discussions, and the time to have those discussions is in the early fall, because come November, staff is already developing budgets. So that was one of the things that we had talked about, was working with the Commission to develop a prioritization of services. Another thing that we've always talked about during the budget process, but we never quite go back and do it, is developing a fee and pricing policy for how all of the different activity fees are set for our different programs. And there are some good examples that are used in other communities. So that might also be something that the Commission would like to work on. Again, that's something that we want to do before we get into the budget process. And I also think, we're going to be talking about both looking to the fiscal year 11 budget, but then also we'll be talking about additional reductions in fiscal year 10, and that's working with what we've already put into place. So I do think that it is important for more than, and we really haven't reported on a regular basis to the Commission with, for instance, how we ended up with how we did last year and where were the savings and what were the impacts. And I think that starting to do more of that in regular reports to the Commission on how we're doing with our budget and not so much from a how are we spending from a fiscal sense, but what's the impact of the reductions and checking in on that. And there was another thing that I just went through my brain. Now I've lost it. And one of the other things that we are really starting to talk about related to golf is we've had a significant reduction in rounds. It's been a trend for a while, but with the economy, we're seeing even steeper reductions. And we're going to be faced with some pretty serious decisions on the operation of the golf course. And we're doing everything that we can do to increase play and look at that. But staff is going to begin developing some options. We'll be working with the Golf Advisory Committee to kind of start talk about some of those things, and we'll be involving the Commission in that. It may not be something that we look at next year. It might be something for the year after that. But clearly we have a fiscally untenuous situation at the golf course.
Will the closure of Glen Annie, do you anticipate an increase in rounds at Muni?
We would hope.
We
would hope. And Montecito Country Club is also going to be closed for a year. So we're doing everything that we can. The course is in top-notch condition. We do have the Creeks project, which will be out there, but we've designed it so that it has minimal impact on play. We're not losing any holes. So we've got some challenges. I think it's more that, it's the economy, and, people are just not spending money on recreation as they usually do.
My other question, there was some talk of losing the street funding.
Yes, thank you. That was the other thing. If the state raids our gas tax, that is the funding that provides street maintenance and also the funding for our street tree forestry program. If, as one of the budget options that the council considered early in the budget process was to take $1 million in the streets fund in the reserves that were scheduled for capital and maybe use that for budget savings based on the premise that a lot of the projects that were funded in that program were eligible for some of the stimulus funding. Well, they didn't do that, and that's good because now it looks like we might lose and be impacted in the streets fund with the gas tax. We will be maybe good for 1 year if the state raids our gas tax because we can go with that plan that we had and look at the capital. But anything beyond that means that we will be sitting down with Public Works to talk about, how do we work together to maintain city streets and maintain our urban forests with a significant reduction in resources. And so that is also, when we know what the state is going to do, then we will have some cushion of time this year to plan, but it will be a major restructuring probably of both programs.
Well, this is for action. Do you want us to come up with a priority list, or do you want, is it enough that we've given you our thoughts on it and maybe you can organize it?
I heard 2 subcommittees And so I would propose to the commission that at your July meeting, we would come back to you with a little bit more thought on an infrastructure, what the infrastructure committee might do and how to structure that, and have you create a subcommittee that would work with staff. The neighborhood and outreach services, I also heard a committee that would include members of the commission and the advisory committees and the youth council. With that one, I probably would like for the commission to actually take an action, because if we're going to ask the other advisory committees and the youth council to appoint somebody, I think it would be very helpful for us to take that information to them now so that they could take that action and appoint the subcommittee, so that immediately following the joint meeting, that committee is starting to meet, so that we're moving things forward pretty quickly.
That makes sense to everyone as a way to move forward on bringing this organization together? You think that it would be a good way for Youth Council to have two active participants to convey information back and forth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and just one item off on the side that I just didn't want to forget about is we've got a new function at Park and Rec, which is, I'm going to call it fundraising donations. We might put I don't know if it would be a subcommittee or what, that would try to help give direction to raising money. And we've got the Park Foundation. I don't know how we'll work that all together. But back on what we were just talking about, yeah, if we need an action item, how would you like the motion presented? And I would.
I think that if the commission agrees to create a subcommittee, then that they take that action tonight. So I heard three committees. So neighborhood and outreach services, fund development, and the infrastructure. So if the commission wants to move forward with establishing those three committees, probably assigning either one or two, depending on the commission's desire to, maybe you even want to go ahead and appoint those, make those appointments today, and staff can move forward. In each of these cases, I would envision that what the committee would be formed from would include other advisory committees that are pertinent to whatever the topic is, having representatives and working closely with staff, in some cases department staff, in some cases staff from other departments, so that we're moving things forward.
Okay.
Point of order. I'm wondering if we need to be concerned whether we're making standing committees or ad hoc committees. I believe that some of the Brown Act rules act differently based on the type of committee we're forming.
You're over my head. Explain. Explain, Mr. Hoffman.
I'm not sure I know the distinctions. I just remember that there are distinctions. So before we go about actually forming committees, I'm hoping that staff can help us with guidance on that.
Advisory committees? Or
The one committee that I know would be Brown Act would be the Neighborhood and Outreach Services, because I think that we will have a lot of community interest in, we would structure it that way anyway. With regard to whether they're ad hoc or, I'm sorry, drawing a blank, standing equipment committees.
A standing committee, as I'm recalling, is a committee that goes on a long time, and I don't believe we're setting, I think these are ad hoc, because especially neighborhood outreach and services is to establish the department, not to go on and on.
I believe, from my recollection, a standing committee, even if it does not have a quorum, still requires notice from Brown Act, but an ad hoc committee, if it's made up of a membership that is not a quorum of the full commission, would not require Brown Act notice. So part of it would be about how many people we want on the committees. Part of it would be, and typically the rules for a standing committee is something that is ongoing, such as budget would typically be a standing committee. If these are more on the lines of task forces to get together and do something and then disband, then that would be more in the lines of an ad hoc committee.
I think at this point they are ad hoc because we've not done this before and we don't know what the effectiveness or what the need is going to be into the future.
One thing I might mention, though, is the fundraising committee. I think you would want that to be a standing committee because fundraising is always going to be happening. But, just to start, I can see doing it as an ad hoc, and you can change afterwards, I would suppose, if you wanted a constant fundraising committee.
Yeah.
Just as I was thinking about it, I mean, you get somebody from the golf committee, get somebody from the tennis advisory committee, get somebody from the park foundation. Let's get a group of people, a diverse group with all different interests, but we all need money, and let's figure out a way to help each other. But I think maybe as an ad hoc to start with may make sense. I don't know.
I think, once we see the effectiveness of the committee. And we may change it to a standing committee at that point. But, so I would say ad hoc to begin. But like neighborhood and outreach services, because of its effect, will be a noticed committee meeting higher level. Okay, so I will attempt this motion. I move that we establish an ad hoc committee for neighborhood and outreach services involving the 3 community center advisory groups and the Youth Council and the Parks and Recreation Commission, 2 members from each committee and commission, to meet and provide and then bring information back to their full committees. Is that okay?
Number 1.
All right. Discussion.
Second it?
Yeah. This guy's second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Abstain, and that 1 abstention. Okay. The other committees.
The infrastructure, financing.
As ad hoc committees, I can just appoint people to them.
Yes.
So that one, yes. What I'd like to do is I'd like maybe an email to go out to everyone. Carla could do that for us. So we involve Daraka and get some information back on what committee, of the 3 committees that we're forming, what people are interested in, and then I'll make appointments. Okay? So does that take, and then we've got some other priorities. Budget, what I would really, I anticipate as we move through the year, we will need some working sessions, but I would like to see it be a regular part of our agenda that we receive reports. One in July, possibly just on the closing of 2009, where where the department stands, and then moving forward, updates on future cuts, all of that. Okay. And the fee and pricing, that I think will be another ad hoc, because that'll be a short term, and you and I can discuss when the staff is ready to look at that.
Just as a comment, as we're coming up with all these things we'd like staff to do, we also want to recognize we don't have a lot of money, and if you think there's some of these things we're asking for might be done in a better way, a less expensive and more effective way, please let us know.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Burns, thank you for that consideration. I actually believe that having the commission provide their leadership in these 3 areas that you've talked about, I think are an asset and a benefit to the work that we're doing. So I think it's staff will be investing time and energy into each of these anyway. And I think having your leadership on that and the visibility of moving forward at the commission level is important.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've stayed away from adding new workload. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And
Move to adjourn?
Second. Oh, wait, we have discussion.
Before we do that, it says adjournment to June 25th.
That's to the.
That is because on June 25th, there is a planning workshop, and I think there was interest in some members to attend that, and if more than three of us
It's in our agenda.
attend.
Just to confirm.
Yeah, it's, I think there was enough interest that we needed to be agendized, so. Okay, so we're adjourning to June 25th at 6 o'clock at the Faulkner Gallery. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Thank you very much.
There's no discussion allowed on it.